Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 6. Film your murders like love scenes, and film your love scenes like murders. Alfred Hitchcock.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Thanks again, guys, for joining me on the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I'm so happy to have you guys here, and thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to thank you all for the amazing response we've been getting from Indie Film Hustle. And in the Indie Film Hustle podcast, it's been getting a ton of downloads from all over the world and growing at an exponential rate that I did not expect it to grow so fast. This is episode number 6. So it's been very, very exciting to say the least. So we with all that excitement, we have a great new sponsor and opportunity for filmmakers. I listen to audiobooks all the time. And because I'm always on the run and I don't have a lot of time to sit down and actually read. So anywhere I'm online or in traffic, and in LA you are in traffic a lot, I listen to audiobooks. So I've made a deal with audible.com, which is owned by Amazon, where you can get one free book by going to freefilmbook.com. I suggest you look up one of their many film books, marketing books, film distribution, directing books, acting books, all sorts of different books that can help you educate yourself more. And the more you read, the more powerful you become because of the more knowledge that you have at your disposal to do what you do. So go again over to freefilmbook.com for that. This episode is going to be fun. It's our I have a good friend of mine, Dan Cregan, who is a big visual effects guy now. When I started out with him, he was my visual effects guy on my small film Broken, and also on my Red Princess Blues. We co-directed the animated movie Red Princess Blues Genesis, where he did all the animation on that as well, and involved with Lipstick and Bullets, my Blu-ray as well. So Dan, I can call him one of my best friends, and it's been amazing to see how he has grown in the visual effects world. He went from Broken to films like Guardians of the Galaxies, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Games of Thrones, Maleficent, 47 Ronin, and The Hobbit, just to name a few. And he just got done off of Fantastic Four as well, which we do discuss a little bit of Fantastic Four as well in this episode. So it's a long one. It's about an hour and a half long. You know, it's a couple film geeks talking, but a lot of great information about visual effects in indie film, and just general good times. So without further ado, my good friend Dan Cregan. And thank you, Dan, so much. Are you there, sir?
I'm here.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. So I wanted to thank you, man. I wanted to talk a little bit about it's no secret, I don't think, that you and I have been real good friends for going on 11 years now. So I wanted you to tell the audience how we met and all the fiascos that we've gone into since then.
Yeah, there's been a few. Well, where to start?
At the beginning is always a good place.
At the beginning, all right. Well, 11 years ago, just about, I was working as a professor at a digital arts school that sent me to a film festival to do a talk about high definition animation, I think it was at this point, because that was like a new thing then.
Yeah, I remember that panel. It was like, HD is going to change the world.
Yeah, it might catch on. Yeah. So it was like a panel discussing, I don't know, render times and how it was going to change the workflow for animation, visual effects, post-production, things like that. Because, it's like 2004 and it's just starting to get out there. Anyway, I do this panel. I was excited because I was pretty fresh out of school and I was teaching, and I was like, oh, now they want me to be on a panel, so I feel all professional and whatnot. So, I knew so little.
We all knew so little, and we still do in many ways.
And then we were given the talk, and my buddy Ken, who we also work with, he was on the panel with me, and I guess we got to bantering pretty good on the panel, and you were in the audience, and And sure enough, you kind of took a shine to us, I think, because you approached us after the panel, and that's where it all began.
And the rest, the worst day in your life, I'm assuming.
I remember you asking if we had business cards, and I was like, "Really? I don't. I'm a visual effects artist. I don't have a business card." And I said, "Well, here's my phone number or whatever. Here's my email address. I think it was at the time." And I don't think it was a day before you had contacted me and said, "We're doing a short film, and I wondered if you'd come down to the studio in Hollywood, Florida, and
thank you for that distinction,
and check it out, and see if you want to be a part of this. There's no money, but maybe you'll be interested in working with us." So that's kind of where it started, and I just wanted to work at the time, working on projects that meant something, or just film projects. I had done one movie at that point, and not even as a visual effects artist, just as a concept designer, storyboard artist. And it excited me to have the opportunity to just work at that point. I was earning money teaching. I just wanted to work. So I came in and we did a meeting, and the rest is, as they say, history.
So why did you decide to work with a young independent filmmaker who had no real credits to his name at all? I mean, I know I was a working editor at the time, and I had a room or an office in a production facility in Hollywood, Florida. So I know that might have legitimized me a little bit. But beyond that smoke and mirrors, what was it about the project, about me? I'm asking this question because I want other filmmakers to understand the reasoning why and how I was able to, get to work with someone of your caliber for free at the beginning of basically the real beginning of my directing career.
Well, I think the first thing was when I came in and did the meeting, it was a good location. I hadn't been in a studio setting before, so location was one thing that I was impressed with right off the bat. The other thing was your passion for your project. There was, I don't know if it was justified or not, but the secrecy that you had around the project, you were like, you got to sign something before you can read the script, and it's going to be huge, and we're going to change the world. And, I was like, oh, this is the real deal. This is something serious here.
Wow.
Oh, man.
Wow, you really just fell off the turnip truck, didn't you, sir?
Yes, I did. I really, really did. And
I saw you coming from a mile away, sir.
You did. You totally took advantage of me. I know. I knew I had a lot of ability at the time. I just didn't know what to do with it. And I saw somebody who needed it at that point. And I thought, I had been involved in one independent project before, and I've seen other independent projects go. And this was different. Broken was a film, and that's what it was called. And that was the start of our collaboration. It was a film that had a lot of visual effects and action, and it was a thriller, and it wasn't the typical independent, talking heads drama. It was more of a mainstream, just exciting thing to do. And I immediately said, well, this is how I want to spend my free time. I want to do this. The other thing was, I mentioned the production setting first. Alex, you also showed me your reel and like all this stuff that looked like you had done MTV promos, music videos, mainstream commercials, and like a dozen films before that. So to my eyes, you always knew how to look pro. And to my eyes, I said, well, this guy's the real deal. Plus, he's making me sign legal documents to read a script. He's got to be the real deal. And, I was taken in by the whole thing. And like I said, I was young and naive, but that can be a good thing, because I think that's when you do some of your best work, is when you have nothing but passion. I think later on you become a little jaded by the process and you kind of lose that spark. Mm-hmm. And I kind of miss that spark at this point. So yeah, it's a good time. It's really a good time.
Well, I mean, I think just so you understand, I've been faking it till I make it since the beginning of my since I was 19 when I started in this business. So all those demo reel that you were looking at were all fake commercials. I happened to grab a bunch of footage at a commercial house that I was working at. I was a dubber. I was dubbing reels. I grabbed a whole bunch of raw footage that they had in the back, re-edited it myself on the weekends, and threw on a Nike logo and threw on different kinds of logos to make myself look bigger. And that's the reel that started getting me work. So we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. You know, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. And obviously it worked with you. So if there's a lesson, I feel
swindled.
Well, if there's a lesson to be, and I think we've done a lot of work over the years. So I'm sure the fake it till you make it thing is very viable and in many ways needed. If not, you can't even crack the door. You know, if you show
it's true. It's true.
Very, very true. So let me ask you a question. Since Broken, obviously your greatest work, you've worked on massive movies, Hobbit, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the recent Fantastic Four as well. How did you leverage? Well, better yet, let's go back. I know how you got in, because you and I were bumping around doing a lot of independent film visual effects and things like that for many years, and I know it was very difficult for you to kind of crack the door open for anyone to even give you a chance to even look at you. Can you tell me a little bit about the digital domain experience and explain to the audience what digital domain was, what happened at Digital Domain in Florida, and how that you leveraged that into where you are today?
Sure. Everybody needs a first big break. Some people, though, they kind of wait for their big break. Working with you and doing other independent shows, I think we did 7 years of independent film.
Oh, yeah.
Just building a reel, kind of cutting my teeth on not all great projects, but professional level projects, as professional as you can get working in the film industry out of Florida. Able to get myself to a certain level where when Digital Domain happened to build a studio in Port St. Lucie, Florida, that I said, wow, I just submitted my stuff and hope for the best. And, it kind of helped. Everything kind of came together. The choices you make really do have an effect on where you end up. I mean, people ask me all the time, how do you get there? How do you get into the industry? How do you break in? There's no one way. There's so many different ways. And there is a great element of luck. I mean, but you got to work hard. I mean, my father always says, luck is when, preparedness meets opportunity. And it's so true. You just have to work and work and work. And you may not get your big break right away. It might come way down the line, but it will come, and some people do get that big break really quick. So, it's funny, like 7 years I worked on independent film, 6 years, 7 years. I got into Digital Domain. I started and I sat down next to a kid who was 19, my buddy Rich. And he's like, yeah, I just worked on Thor. And I'm like, oh, I just felt like
slapping him. You felt like slapping him.
Yeah,
say
I really did.
Yeah.
Digital Domain pulled him out of community college to work on the program and brought him right in. They were looking for a lot of young, fresh, potential talent. They brought me in as an experienced artist, but still I hadn't done the big shows. And seeing everybody get an opportunity, I felt good for him. But obviously you start feeling like, what have I been doing for 7 years? And I guess, I know we talked about it a lot of times. You always thought I should move out to LA, and maybe I would have gotten into the industry sooner if I had moved out. I didn't. I like Florida. I still live here in Florida. And, I kind of wanted to go my own way. And,
So what happened at Digital Domain once you got in there? What happened with the rise and fall of Digital Domain? And then how did you leverage that into the next phase of your career?
Well, Digital Domain lasted for me and for most everybody at the company for about 2 years. There's a lot of it available out there on the internet. You can pretty much find the whole story. It basically, John Texter, who was running Digital Domain, he had a lot of big dreams. He wanted to do so many things, and he wanted to do it in Florida, and he wanted to, kind of get Digital Domain, into new avenues like an animated film and military simulation and video game design. And he wanted to do it all, and he wanted to do it all right away. And, they had a lot going. I mean, the animated film was the big thing. And I think that's what we were counting on to help us survive as a studio and grow. And creating your own content is really important in this day and age. And the problem is that making an animated film, is a long, long process. It takes 4 or 5 years, maybe, best case scenario, from conception to theater to get one of those out. The Pixars, the DreamWorks, they can do it faster. Still not that much faster, but they can do it faster because they've got a good pipeline. We were building our own pipeline. We were using Digital Domain Venice's structure, but for an animated film, they were creating it as they went. And, we had a lot of great people, people from Pixar and from Disney, and, industry veterans. They all knew what they were doing, and everybody had great intentions. And, the money just kind of fell through. It kind of comes to, everybody going where they get help from states and help from governments. And, it's just the reality of the industry right now. And you kind of need that subsidy money to keep it going. And it wasn't the whole story with Digital Domain, but that was kind of part of it, kind of running the company on government money. Which was working to a certain degree. We were employed 300 people here in Florida.
Wow.
And that's a lot in industry. A lot of people came from other studios and other places around the world, and they wanted to get away and settle in a nice quiet place and go to the beach and have no traffic. And they bought houses. But the problem is that when we fell, when we were all let go and the company restructured, you can't work in the industry here. So a lot of these people who had moved here had to move back or go someplace else or switch industries. It was a tough time. But, for a lot of us, for myself and a lot of the people who started out with Digital Domain, it became the springboard to bigger and better things. You can work on independent film for a long time, but until you've done some major films, a lot of studios won't really treat you like you're a veteran. But once you have a major studio on your resume, all of a sudden you're a member of the club, and it's like, hey, you work.
You're a good fella.
Domain.
You're a good fella.
You're in.
You're in. You've been vouched for.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, the emails start coming, and you start having choices to make. And it's not, can I work? It's, where do I want to work? And I think I've said it many times. I was told this when I was in school, and I didn't understand it. And it was that artists would come into my where I went to school and say, networking is the most important thing if you want to work. And there is nothing truer. People I met at Digital Domain, I still work with at studios around the world. And, we kind of are a special group because we were a part of something that was starting up here. And there's nothing like a startup. There's nothing like starting out something new with people. Those people become an extended family. And working with them, in other studios has been fun. But who they're like, hey, I worked with him in another studio. Let's bring him in here. It's the most important thing. When people know you and you have a good reputation, that's how you get into other studios. So after Digital Domain, it wasn't really that difficult all of a sudden. After 7 years of trying to break in through the door, now everybody wanted me to a certain degree. I mean, it's still, challenging to get a job, but, you were taken seriously. And that was a nice change. So, right after Digital Domain, I went up to New York and I worked at Blue Sky, which is really in Connecticut, but they put you up in New York. So it's kind of the same. On a movie called Epic, and I got to see how animated films are made. And after that, somebody I worked with at Digital Domain and at Blue Sky said, hey, we're going to Weta, and they're looking for people. Do you want to come? I'm like,
yeah, they're doing that little independent film called The Hobbit.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, New Zealand. How long am I going to have to go there? Exactly, it was 5 months.
Oh, uh-huh.
And and I said, okay, that's a long time to be away from home, but how many times am I going to get paid to go to New Zealand to work on a huge film? I mean, it's probably still the biggest film I've been a part of. as far as worldwide coverage and events and, a buzz and hype,
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
I'm not saying they turned out as good as The Lord of the Rings, because they didn't, but I was proud. I was really proud to have gone down there and worked with Weta. I also got to do Dawn of the Planet of the Apes when I was down there, which was an amazing film. I'm proud to have worked on that. So the Weta trip was great. And of course, then people start looking at your reel and your resume and go, oh, you worked at Weta, Blue Sky, Digital Domain. And then it just snowballs and snowballs.
Of course.
And before you know it, you're in. Then it's just choosing where do you want to work. And for VFX artists now, it's Vancouver, Montreal, London, New Zealand, Australia. These are the places where the work is. So you kind of have to choose what you want to do. Do you want to move to one of these places? Do you want to stay home and just take short contracts? Do you want to, leave the industry? The industry's in a strange place right now, and you kind of have to decide what's best for you as a person and how you want to move forward, But, I love working on movies. There's the only thing I've ever wanted to do, really. I mean, they've been a passion of mine since I was just a kid. And I can't imagine doing anything else, really. It's hard to imagine doing anything else.
So that's awesome. That's a great story. I'm not jealous at all.
I couldn't have got there without you, sir.
No. It's too late. Let's move on. So let me ask you a question. What are your experiences? And I've been on a lot of these experiences with you, but what is your experiences in visual effects when dealing with independent films as a general statement? What kind of problems do you run into? What kind of issues, things like that?
Well, I think for independent films, the worst thing is probably the lack of understanding about the visual effects process. So the people who are making the independent film tend to be a little bit less educated in how the VFX work. Therefore, when they're shooting, they don't prepare properly either what they're shooting, how they're shooting it, what their expectations are about what the result is going to be. I mean, the lack of knowledge is definitely the most difficult part when you're working on an independent film. When you have a tight budget and you have a lofty goal, if you will, you have to plan. You have to figure out how it's going to get done, and you have to plan everything out precisely. You don't have extra money, extra time. On big films, when I work at big studios, if there's something wrong and it needs to be fixed, big studios can just throw more money at it. Independent films don't have that luxury. So, they have to plan more. They have to prepare more, and they have to get educated about what they're trying to accomplish. And the problem is that they often don't. So they often think, they go to the movies and they see all these things, and they're like, I want that. I want, a character, a full CG character like Gollum in my short little independent film. There's just a button on the keyboard for that, isn't it? It can't be that difficult. And they don't really think it through precisely. Right. And and I think it's just not knowing. So if you're an independent filmmaker, get educated about the process, about what it takes, the man hours, the computing power, the preparation, how you shoot something, the difference between, visual effects in a locked off shot versus visual effects in a moving shot. I mean, how to light a green screen properly. We could talk hours and hours about just everything that needs to be done for things to work smoothly on the post-production side. And I don't think enough young independent filmmakers really do that unless they come from a visual effects background, which you're seeing a lot of, like, on YouTube and whatnot. You're seeing visual effects artists doing short films, right? Like the Pixels short, which they bought and turned into Pixels. And
well, we don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing at this point.
Well, it was all right, but I'm just saying those people maybe aren't the best filmmakers, but sometimes they are. I mean, it's where are you coming from? Are you a writer that wants to be a filmmaker? Are you a visual artist that wants to be a filmmaker? There's many different types of filmmakers, and the problems are different for everybody. So there's never any one answer to any of these questions about how you do it correctly. It's just kind of every situation's different. That's it.
Yeah. So like when I had a client of mine or a student call me up asking for quotes on visual effects. And generally, when we work together, I work as your visual effects supervisor, more for the client, not supervising you, but kind of just the middleman. I can speak your language; they can't, so I translate for them for you. And the guy told me, he's like, "Okay, did you see that scene in Avengers?" I'm like, "You need to stop right there." There is,
and that is the problem.
And there is
there.
nothing in Avengers that we can do. Nothing at all. Just stop. Just stop right there. Nothing. So, and I think there is a lot of that going on in indie film, and I've gone. I mean, we've dealt with it on numbers and numbers of features that we've worked on. And I agree with you. I think it's getting a little better, but there's still a lot of lack of knowledge and just ignorance.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the audience is becoming more knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
People are, the argument out there, oh, CG sucks, or this is too much CG, or, there is, a lot of visual effects out there and these big tentpole films, and people are getting tired of it. It's like a lot of noise, and the filmmaking is what's being neglected in favor of a lot of, razzle dazzle visual effects. And the audience, though, is starting to understand, and their eyes are getting more developed, and they're starting to see the process on their own. So if the filmmakers are going to come from the new filmmakers are going to come from the audience, they are going to have a more, I don't know what the best way to put it, a more thorough understanding of the visual effects process. But it's still a little different to knowing it when you see it to knowing how to create it.
Well, yeah, I mean, my wife, for God's sakes, I mean, who's not in the business at all, she would go to a movie and go, "Oh, that was a horrible green screen," in a major motion picture. None that you've done, of course, but so I find that funny. But if she's doing that, I can only imagine everyone's becoming more visual effects literate. As things go, as all the behind the scenes come out, and people have just become much more knowledgeable about how the process is. In a lot of ways, I think it's kind of ruined the film industry a bit because the magic's kind of gone. Because before you would look at, King Kong back in the 30s and nobody knew how they did that. They just were amazed at the spectacle.
No, what about Star Wars, 1977?
Yeah, I don't even go that far back.
When I was a kid, I couldn't even fathom what was creating the imagery I was looking at. I just accepted it as real. And I feel bad that people aren't having the same experience today. And maybe they are, maybe kids are nowadays, but sometimes I don't know how to look at something from that perspective anymore. And I wonder if anybody does, because like you said, all the behind the scenes and the common knowledge and, and all the technology that's available to every person. Everybody has a video editing program that can do a key, and they know what green screen is, and they can do basic stuff. So, Photoshop, a lot of people know Photoshop and they know what's possible. So, it's kind of a challenge now to actually wow people nowadays requires a crazy amount of, innovation, I would say.
So, I agree with you 110%. That's why Avatar did what it did. Like when Avatar came out, it was the kind of first time I've felt magic at the movie theater again, because I kind of got what he was doing originally. The technology hadn't been explained quite yet, what he had done with Avatar, what James Cameron did with Avatar, but it was amazing. I mean, you watch it today, you're like, Jesus, man, it's like ridiculous. What he's did. And I can only imagine what the next 3 movies are going to be like. But he's one of those directors that constantly is pushing the medium forward. And so it's exciting to see those kind of films, which are rare and rare nowadays.
Well, they're always kind of been rare. The problem is that, we all know, Hollywood does what works. And so if something works, they copy it over and over and over again. So we as an audience get to see the same product over and over and over again. And, that's the problem. But every once in a while, a visionary comes out and pushes the envelope. So you have The Matrix in 1999, you've got Terminator 2, you've got, Jurassic Park. I mean, and all these things have in common is that they showed you something that you've never seen before. So that's like, one of the things you have to do. It's either something you've never seen before, or you have to do it better than anybody's ever done it before. So,
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
I think recently, Gravity was impressive. I think, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I worked on it, so I'm kind of disqualified. But I thought looking at the apes in that movie, I started to really, truly believe that digital, actors were just a fact of life at this point. So, but it's still have to take a studio to the level of Weta to do something like that. So independent films, no, not so much. So, but independent films have their own place. They can do other things really well.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think now, are we kind of like 20 years behind in technology in the sense? So, and let me explain. Like Jurassic Park came out in 1992, so
93,
excuse me. So, to make a dinosaur back then was insanely difficult. Nowadays, you can almost, and I hate to say, touch a button or two and get a dinosaur. In other words, it's a lot easier for us to do it today, even in an independent film world. I wouldn't, and maybe a dinosaur is not a good analogy, but that technology it's a lot more accessible. So now, before, keying used to be a huge event. Now it's in every editing system known to man, and really good keyers, especially if you know what you're doing. So a lot of this stuff. So like, in 20 years, are we going to be looking at Avatar like that was cute? And I think we will to a certain extent, because you look at The Matrix now, which is now what, 15, 16 years old now? 99. Yep. It came out in 99. So like 16 years old. A lot of that stuff still holds up. Like most of that movie still holds very, very well. But a lot of the technology that they were using then is much more accessible now. So do you think that we're like about a 15, 20 year gap between the everyday man, everyday filmmaker, the indie filmmaker being able to even attain that kind of technology? Or am I just talking out of my butt?
Well, I don't know about the gap. It's more of a knowledge gap and a hardware gap, and not the complexity of the hardware and software, just the actual, amount of it, right? So, if you have a really good gaming rig, a good computer at home, and you've got a lot of talent, you can do some pretty complex CGI. But, to really render, a lot of it for a film, you would need a render farm that was massive. So like Transformers. So the alleyway scene, when you see them all transform and we're all introduced to the Autobots the first time, I think that was taking 4 days a frame at ILM with their world-class render farm.
Back then.
So back then, and they're still doing stuff. And Noah, broke their render farm with all those animals in the Ark just a year ago. So it's not so much the technology change, it's the
horsepower.
The process. Yeah, it's the horsepower or the sheer amount of computing power. And as you get more of it, you can do more of it. So it's never really a knowledge thing. It's never really a software thing anymore. It's more of a actual horsepower, problem. And not only that, it's something I love to tell people. Anybody who will listen, the problem is that more isn't better. The reason why The Matrix, holds up is because they could do what they could do on the budget they had, and they had to be creative. The reason why Jaws holds up is that the shark wasn't working. So Steven Spielberg had to come up with different ways to build suspense, and it makes for a better film. So over the years with visual effects, less is better. So actually, from an independent standpoint, having limitations is good. And, I think when you look at the Matrix sequels, and they had all the computing power and all the manpower and all the, the biggest and the best, and was the product a little bit inferior than the first one? Well, maybe for a variety of reasons, but you see the seams more in the work in the second two movies than you do in the first one, because they tried to do more and be more ambitious, and more usually equals something that's going to age badly. When you have to be reserved and just kind of sneak it by the audience, you actually get a better product, I think, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. But I think struggle breeds a better product, a better art. When you have everything available to you, you tend to get lazy or not try as hard, So, there is an upside to struggle. There is an upside to having limitations. And I think it's an important thing for every filmmaker to go through.
Well, it's going on that theme of less is more. Hitchcock famously said, "What's more suspenseful, to see someone get murdered in a bedroom, or to be outside the room and hear a murder happening in the bedroom?" It's obviously the second one, because your mind fills in all the blanks. So that's why when you watch Reservoir Dogs, when he cuts off the ear, you don't see it. And he actually shot it with them cutting it off. And when he looked at it in the editing room, Quentin said, no. It's much more powerful, letting your imagination run wild. And that's exactly why people are so disturbed by that scene, because their imagination is much more vivid than any visual effect can ever be.
That's true. That is 100% correct. And I don't care how good the art form gets, it's never going to match what the worst that you can imagine, or the best, or the best that you can imagine. So, it's good. It's good that is an issue, because I think filmmakers still need to learn that technique. I thought, boy, this is going to get me in trouble, but I thought M. Night Shyamalan actually knew that pretty well, in the early days of his career. And
you don't have to worry about it. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I just felt like that's why there was so much hope behind him and his work.
Yeah,
because it felt like he was a filmmaker that got that. And
he got it for a few films. I'll give it to him. But look, most of us will never have a sixth sense in our lives as a creative artist. So I can't knock him too much.
No.
But or an Unbreakable. I even enjoy Signs, but I agree with you. Yeah, let's not get on the M. Night bandwagon right now, because
that's a whole other show.
That's a whole other show. We could just talk about what directors, where all directors have failed, and we are so no. I'm joking.
We've all failed.
We've got and then some, my friend, and then some. So what advice would you give independent filmmakers when it comes to visual effects? I know we went over a little bit, but any specific advice, maybe about? I know you and I talked about green screen and tape. Among other things. So some basic stuff that you see that you've seen come through the door, and you just go, man, if they could just get these 3 or 4 things right, God, it'd make things so much easier, so much more affordable, and a better product at the end.
Well, any we've talked about it in the past, and I think that in our work, and I think anytime you have a lock-off shot, you factor down the difficulty of the shot by 10. It's so much easier to work in a locked off shot. Now, I know dynamically our eye nowadays, film, we're used to seeing the camera move a lot. But you don't necessarily need that to make a great film. Fincher will have a lot of locked off shots, so it can be done. A lock off will save the digital artist a lot of work, because it eliminates tracking. It eliminates, a lot of the complications, perspective changes, things like that come from a camera moving. So it allows you to cheat more when a shot isn't in motion. So I would say that's like the number one thing you could do to help a visual artist on a very low micro budget film or low budget film.
Now, the other thing is also, though, with technology the way it is, people shooting 6K and now 8K. If your final output's going to be, let's say, 2K or just HD, if you shoot something even just good old-fashioned red camera 4K, and do the visual effects at 4K, you should be able to do small camera movements within the frame in post without losing quality issues. It's as a cheat. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's definitely better to do a post move. As far as it would allow you to still work as if it were a lock off, and you would still get the motion that you want. So yeah, that's a fair thing. Except you do introduce a couple new problems when you're working in 4K or 5K. I was working on a Hobbit in 5K. Boy, everything goes slower.
Yeah,
I think
there's that.
I think way back 11 years ago when we were talking about that HD in animation panel where we met, we were talking about, render times with HD and, how is it going to slow down your computer? Well, nowadays, 4K, 5K,
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
48 frames a second like we did on The Hobbit, 60 frames a second like Cameron wants to do on the Avatar sequels. It's beautiful stuff, but it creates so much more work for the digital artist. It actually slows down the process, so much to go bigger because every time you throw a paint stroke down, the computer's got to think about it, twice as hard or 4 times as hard or 10 times as hard, whatever. It's just so much more for the computer to deal with when you're dealing with large file sizes. So there is that factor. If you do go that route, you have to be aware of it as well. So yeah, but that is definitely something. And as far as green screen goes for independent films, lighting it well is the key thing. People think that you can put anything in front of green. I've seen so many many projects, right? They'll throw a green towel over one part of the background behind the actor and be like, "Oh, you can just remove that, right?" That's how visual effects are done.
No, didn't you forget that we had a movie back in Florida that we did that had 4 different 4 different greens as part of the green screen. Like they use like a paper, then the paint, then a blanket, and it was all. And then of course the actor crossed all 4 of them, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like seriously?"
Like what is that supposed to do? I mean, at that point, you just rotoscope it. It would be faster.
What are you doing?
It comes back to what we were talking about. It's a lack of understanding of how the process works. So, the whole point to throw an even color, with no variation is lost on people who don't understand that that's the whole point of a green screen,
Right. And then also the tape marks, because I know a lot of filmmakers see on behind the scenes that there's a couple markers on the green screen.
Yeah.
And they go a little nuts, don't they?
Well, they immediately think we got to have those. Well, first of all, if we go back to my point number 1, if it's a locked off shot, you don't need to have any tracking markers on your green screen.
Because you're not tracking, right?
Because you're not tracking. But if you are moving the camera, yeah, I understand you need tracking markers, but guess what? You don't need 600 of them. All you need is
more is better. More is better.
All you need is a couple that the artist can see that is visible in the frame, every frame. So definitely, it's on The Hobbit. We had a problem with that. Actually, there was a few too many tracking markers in the scenes, and it took the paint department quite some time to paint them out. So
and look at that, even on a multi-billion-dollar budget, but
it still happens.
$100 million budget films. Oh, and I've seen $200 million movies with bad visual effects in it. So it happens. It's not a perfect art by any stretch. It's always about the artist and the team behind it.
Bad decisions are made by people with $200 million and with people with $1 million or $200,000. It's
$2.
Or $2. Bad decisions are made across the board. That's just life. That's people. So yeah, it's something that you're going to have to deal with, no matter where you go and what you do. And the only thing you can do is be a little bit more prepared and educated and do a better job than the people who do that, because I guarantee you'll have less headaches.
So I'm going to take you back for a second. I just remembered the story, and I think you'll get a kick out of it, and it kind of illustrates what we're talking about. You remember the Star Wars fan film
Yeah, I do remember that. What a great example.
So for the audience, there was this Star Wars fan film a guy was putting together. You know, there was a run of Star Wars, and there still are a lot of Star Wars fan films made out there.
Some very good ones. Some very good ones by some very talented people.
Some are amazing, like amazing. My favorite of the old school one was Trooper. Is it Troops? Trooper?
Troops. The cops parody.
That was kind of like the first big one that kind of popped out, right?
The one that hit the mainstream and people were passing around on the internet, you know,
or passing around on DVD. I don't even think the internet could handle the load at the time.
I saw it on the internet. I think it was the early days, modem internet. But
were you watching it on AOL, sir?
Yeah, I think it took like, you know, an hour to load or something like that.
It was well worth it.
Yeah.
So this guy came to us with the Star Wars fan film, and he literally thought he was going to sell it to George Lucas. He was going to be a director on one of the Star Wars shows. He had a whole vision for this. So we saw the footage that he had shot, and he had worked so hard and had put together so many people to put this thing together. And when we saw it, we looked at him and we just go, this is unusable. It's going to cost you a fortune to fix. He had wires everywhere. He had green screens in places that didn't need to be green screened. He didn't have any motion trackers. He didn't have, I just remember the stunts. Like there was camera gear in the way. He's like, oh, you'll just take that out or just take this out. And I remember sitting there with you, Dan, look at him like, this is going to cost you a fortune. Like, first of all, we can't do this. You can't afford us to do this. And I don't even know where the film ended up. I don't even know if he ever finished it.
Did it ever come out? Because I don't know if I ever saw it come out.
I don't remember it either. We kind of looked for it, months later, and I don't know if it ever got released or not. But that was a perfect example of a filmmaker not just doing their homework and figuring it out and being so in love with their own project and in love with them themselves in many ways, that the project suffered, the art suffered, and it was sad. It was really sad for us because we were excited because it was, oh, cool, a Star Wars film, that'll be cool. But it was just so grossly poorly done as far as visual effects are concerned. In a film that is visual effects heavy is almost unexcusable. Do you remember the whole process, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking it. I do admire his ambition, and it's kind of like what I was saying at the very beginning. I miss that spark. Like that's Agreed. A good spark to have. Like
absolutely.
To just want to do it, to say I'm going to do this, and it's going to be amazing. And I love that. I love that enthusiasm. But
a little knowledge helps.
Yeah, the knowledge could have saved him. It could have saved him a lot. I thought it was a little ironic because I think I remember correctly on that project they were like, yeah, and we got to this point of the movie and it looks like it's coming out really good, but we're kind of out of money. So can we do the visual effects for, I don't know. Do you remember the amount? It was really small.
It was like $500 or something like that for like 4,000 visual effect shots and
it was,
and paint work and then we were going to bring in our buddy Sean, who also worked with us on Broken and other movies. And we all looked at him like, you're out of your mind. Like, you're crazy. Like, I love Star Wars as the next, as much as the next guy, maybe a little bit more. But I'm not doing, I can't do that. Dan, you'd be doing this for what? A year?
It would have been bad. That was at least a 6-month project.
If not longer.
I think it might have, we could have done it if it was like our full-time job. And, but there weren't enough of us to do it to the level that they needed to be done. Honestly, they needed a small boutique visual effects house that was staffed with, 30 people or something to that nature. Maybe they could have done it.
But we're also looking back. I think that was like 2006 or something like that.
Sounds about right.
And in 2006, the technology wasn't up to par just yet. There wasn't as much horsepower as there is to do that kind of job. Now it sounds like, oh, yeah, you could do this, this, and this because a lot of the Macs coming out now have insane amounts of horsepower, and you could buy video cards and render cards and all this kind of stuff now you could do some cool stuff. But back then you really needed like a mini ILM to deal with that. And they weren't around.
He kind of did okay if he was a studio, because then he could have just thrown out more money, You see, if he had more money, all the problems could have been fixed.
Right.
But it's what you have to remember when you're an independent film. You don't have more money, so you can't fix these problems.
Mhm.
You know, there are people who shoot giant films still, do what we were just saying, have bad habits. They leave too many tracking markers in, or, they leave crew people in the shot, or they leave camera gear in the shot, but they have the money to tell an ILM to just remove it. And
Well,
ILM will go, okay.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Yeah, I remember when you were working on The Hobbit, you were telling me that Peter Jackson, like everything was being painted out. Like he just left everything in. He didn't matter. Like he just, just paint it out. Oh, just paint this out. Paint that guy out. Paint this out. Paint that out. And it was all the time. But owns Weta.
Yeah, and you can do that when you own Weta, and that's an awesome thing. Like George,
like George Lucas.
There are very few people who have this kind of power. George did with his whole empire of post-production facilities and visual effects and all that, and Peter Jackson built the same thing with Weta and Stone Street Studios and Park Road Post, and he had the same freedom that George did. And that's, I can rework this film until the day it hits theaters, and I can do it at a super high level because I have the resources. Having the resources changes everything, but when you don't have the resources, you have to think in a completely different manner. So yeah, I mean, it's a different ballgame.
But there's literally you can count them on one hand how many guys on the planet can do that.
Yeah, it's true. There are very few people with the kind of power. I mean, it's not so much even power. It's besides Lucas and Peter Jackson and maybe Robert Rodriguez, who kind of built a mini version of this. How many people have that whole control over their film and their process, So there are powerful directors, a Chris Nolan, a James Cameron, these guys can get their films made, and studios will throw a bunch of money at them to do it, but very few guys have control over everything. And, like a Lucas or a Jackson. And Cameron kind of does have the same amount of control.
I was about to say, the only guy...
He could do whatever he wants.
Well, like I was saying, I forgot someone interviewed Cameron about Avatar, and I think he said something like, I'm pretty much like one of two guys on the planet that could do this.
Yeah.
Like literally, who else is going to do Avatar? Who else is going to be handed arguably I think $400 million budget on a property that had never been seen before? You had to basically launch an entire property, an entire brand, invent new technology along the way. How many guys? Really?
It's so rare. It's absolutely, minuscule the percentage of people who get to play in that kind of sandbox.
Oh.
And the problem is that they kind of give everybody James Cameron's kind of famous for saying, go out and shoot it yourself, go out and shoot something,
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that if you do go out and shoot something, don't expect it to look like a James Cameron movie. It's such different worlds, that they play it in such different fields. And Cameron, I was going to say the thing that separates him from a Lucas or a Peter Jackson is that he hasn't really built his own empire, but his films are so successful that he can just borrow other people's empire and they'll just hand him the keys and go ahead, go do whatever you want. So
he has a blank check almost.
He does, because he's literally has a nearly unblemished record. I think his worst performing movie was The Abyss, and I love The Abyss. So he has almost a perfect record of filmmaking. Not many people could say that.
And The Abyss being the, arguably, I think they rated it the toughest film shoot in history.
Yeah.
Outdoing Apocalypse Now,
Yeah.
as like the most difficult film shoot in movie history. And if you ever watched that documentary on his, on that Blu-ray, which I've watched a million times since I was in college, you just sit there going, there's just very few human beings, directors on the planet that could do something like that. But we're going off topic. We've kind of swayed off into movie geek land.
That happens a lot with us. We apologize.
But a lot of it good information popping out. So what kind of advice can you give young visual effects artists starting out and trying to break into this extremely diluted market and difficult market to get into in the visual effects world?
Well, this answer, it changes and it doesn't change, because I think it's a thing I get asked more often than any other thing. Whether wherever I go, if people know what I do, they're like, "Oh, how do I do that?" There, like I said earlier, there is no one way to get into the business. I mean, you could argue so many different paths, right? We could say, well, you go to school. But then if you go to school and you pay an exorbitant amount of money to go to an art school and you build up $40,000, $50,000 in student loans, that's not exactly a good way to go if you could have learned the same on the internet, which you can. Nowadays, the information's all out there. If you want to learn, you can learn on your own. But then what's important to get in the industry is to know people in the network. One of the best places to start your networking is at school. So you can go back and forth over which first step to take, self-learning or school. Either one of those is the first step, but you're going to have to make some concessions whichever way you choose. And once you taught yourself what to do, whether you're in school or whether you self-taught, then you've got to get in the door of a company. And how do you get in the door when nobody wants to give you a chance? When it's visual effects is one of those fields that has a quote unquote, a glamour kind of, around it. And it's funny because it's very unglamorous, and I know a lot of people like to say that, some people even say being a movie star is unglamorous because you spend a lot of time in a trailer waiting on set, and there's a lot of doing nothing and, a lot of strange locations. But, visual effects is very similar in that the idea of what you do is amazing and what you actually produce is amazing. But the actual process of doing it is very difficult. 16-hour days, 7 days a week, months on end, living out of hotels, traveling a lot, which can be a good and a bad thing. I mean, these things are very challenging. So the next thing, if you want to do this, make sure that you love it. You have to love this more than anything else. Otherwise, you're going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I've known a lot of people starting out who said, "Oh, it kind of sounds cool. I like movies. I'll go learn to be a visual effects artist." But that's not enough. You have to, you have to love it, and you have to want to work on a movie more than anything else in the world, because otherwise this industry will just eat you up and spit you out. I mean, when you get in your first job, I mean, you're going to be excited and you're probably going to not understand how tough it's going to be. And then, after you work 3 months at 7 days a week for 16 hours a day, you start to feel not human anymore. And you might, at that point, wonder whether you want to keep doing it or not. And it's an important question to ask yourself, because the internet is full of people who will complain about this field and complain about how hard it is. But, if you love it, it's still worth doing. And that's definitely for sure. As far as getting that big break, I would say even today, the best place to get your start is in stereo. I know that sounds, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to do 3D conversion or whatnot. But a lot of places will hire inexperienced people to do stereo. So it's a good way to break in.
I hate to interrupt. Can you please explain to people what stereo is exactly?
Okay. It's, the process of making a film 3D. A lot of movies that come out nowadays are 3D. And, it's, what it has to be done. A lot of films are shot 2-dimensionally and then converted into 3D by VFX artists. So the film has to be essentially dimensionalized, or any other word you want to call it. At any rate, this is a good starting out job for a visual effects artist, because there's not as much creativity. I really hate to say that, because the people who do 3D well are extremely talented and have an extremely specialized skill set, and they do really good work that produce amazing effects. Good 3D is awe-inspiring, and the people that can do it, I have so much respect for. But a lot of the 3D today is just done for the sake of saying our movie's in 3D, let's charge $25 a ticket. So it's done for not artistic reasons like a Cameron would do. It's done more for let's get more dollars per head in the theater. and the rest of the world loves 3D. So, 3D is a whole discussion onto itself too.
Got it.
But it's a good place to start out if you're a visual effects artist, because they hire a lot of inexperienced kids, and it's a good place to get in the door. And you don't have to be a kid. If you just anytime you're entering the industry, it's a good place to get your start. The trick then is you're not out of the gauntlet yet. If you get into a 3D company like Legend in San Diego, Stereo D in Toronto, Prime Focus, your next challenge is getting out of 3D and into 2D, because there's a whole kind of invisible wall that tends to block those two disciplines. And rightfully or unrightfully so, I think unrightfully so, there's plenty of artists who do stereo that can really do 2D, normal visual effects as well. So, after you get out of there, you can get another job, that is closer to what you want to do. You might have to do undesirable jobs. And that's the kind of the lesson here. The other thing you can do if you don't want to go the stereo route, you can kind of do what we did, which was
more
independent
painful.
film.
Much more painful.
Which a lot more painful because you weren't working on big films. You can, go out there and, push your services on every independent film that just needs visual effects done for very little money.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. And
so when you're starting out, and when you're starting out, if you got good skills but nobody will take you in as an artist, your best way to improve your reel is to work on independent films that look good. That's a kind of a different distinction than just independent films. As an artist, if you really, as a visual effects artist, your reel is everything, right? So you're judged by your reel. It doesn't matter what your resume says. You're judged by that 2 minutes you can put on screen that shows this is who I am, this is what I can do. And when you come out of school or you have self-taught lessons, you tend to look just like every other person of that level. The work tends to all look the same, and it's not even close to professional. So the best thing you could do is kind of offer your services to a good-looking independent film. Now, this is kind of like why I hooked up with you, Alex, because your stuff looked good. At the end of the day, when I looked at your reel, regardless of whether it was a real Nike commercial or not,
I faked it well.
I knew what I was looking at was done by somebody with a lot of talent. And I said, well, I'm going to combine my talent with his talent, and we're going to make good-looking stuff. We may not make any money, but we're going to make some good-looking stuff. And that's a good thing to have on your reel. That pays off later. There's a lot of people, and rightfully so, who will say, don't work for free, don't get taken advantage of. And it's true, you shouldn't. But sometimes you kind of have to do some pro bono work to get the reel looking good, but make sure that you choose correctly. You've got to be a good judge of project. If the stuff that they're shooting for their film looks terrible, any VFX work that you do is going to look terrible because it's combined with that footage. So make sure that you're working with good looking footage. That's number one. If you're going to work cheap, make sure the work comes out really well or free, and then hopefully if you do enough of these projects, the people you're working with will start paying you. And that's hope number one. Hope number two is that you build a reel that will grab the attention of a company that is looking for new artists. And be prepared to make less. Obviously, when you're starting out, you're going to be making the entry level. And your greatest asset when you're inexperienced to a big studio is that you work cheaper. So, it's going to be a long road up. And, that's just the reality of it. And there'll always be that person who knows somebody who has some good student project that gets picked to go right into the big show and gets paid a senior rate right off the bat. That happens everywhere. Like, I know I've heard you tell people, Alex, like, the Blair Witch guys or
Robert Rodriguez or
Kevin Smith, this doesn't happen to everybody.
Right.
It just doesn't. And everybody thinks, oh, I'll do that one great thing and I'll be on my way. And I'll
the
get
lottery
noticed.
ticket.
The lottery ticket, exactly. And if it does happen to you, that's awesome. That's amazing. And you know what, I'm not gonna downplay that. You probably earned it, and it's probably a great thing that it happened to you. But for the 99% of the rest of us, we're gonna have to grind and work and toil and just kind of pull ourselves up under our own steam. And it takes time. And an overnight success. If somebody said, "Oh wow, you're pretty successful," it happened pretty fast. You've only, I started a Digital Domain in 2011. It is now 2015, and most of my big work has been done in the last 4 years. But guess what? The 7 years before it were what made me be in a position to actually do the last 4 years. So that's an important step.
So. And if you told me correctly, that one of the reasons why you got hired at Digital Domain was because of our work together with Numb Robot.
Oh yes, yeah. Those 7 years of independent films, I picked the best of what we worked on, and the best stuff was the stuff we had done together and created together because we had control over what we were creating. You're kind of at the mercy when you're working for a client. You're at the mercy of their eye, of their wants, of their preferences. So, the stuff that we did together ended up being the best stuff on the reel.
But you also had some. It never hurts to put a star on your reel.
Oh no, well that's a good point too. I mean, it's funny just. Just doing an independent film when you're choosing an independent project. Remember, I said choose good looking. Footage. Mm-hmm. The other thing you should choose is a name actor. If it has a name actor and you can get shots with a name actor, people tend to take you more seriously. It's like, oh, you worked on a professional project. Why? Because I recognize that actor. I mean, for me, it was, a couple things, but I think the first big one was Richard Dreyfuss, right?
Right. Lightkeepers,
and having that on the reel helped. And so I went to Digital Domain. It's funny. It's a strange story because when I interviewed with a person later on, that person ended up being my lead on the floor, and I asked him, "How did I do in the interview? And what was it about my reel that got me hired?" And he said, "You fell right into the right category. We weren't looking to hire really experienced people because we don't have the money to pay really experienced people, and we weren't looking for people who do nothing. We were looking for somebody right in the right middle segment." So
the Goldilocks.
It kind of worked out for me at that point. I had just enough professional work to where I looked like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't have the big shows that looked like I would have been way too expensive for them. So, that worked out perfectly. And, I'm really, it's been a strange road. It's been a long, strange road,
And we're still on it, sir.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes it's I don't know. It's hard to wrap my head around at this point.
So, we're gonna start wrapping it up. I have a couple more questions for you. And I know the answer to this, but I want you to answer it for the audience. How important is design, marketing, and promotion when it comes to promoting yourself or your film projects out to the world?
I mean, it's hard to quantify, but it's definitely one of the most important things I would say that you need to do. I mean, it's got to pass the eye test. Everything you do has to pass the eye test. Usually people see something, they can tell right away whether it's professional or not. And looking like a professional is more important than being a professional when you have big dreams. So when you're trying to impress people or get noticed or be taken seriously, we don't even have to change the world, right? You just want to be taken seriously. You have to look professional. So, the presentation of something is the most important thing to me. I mean, this is one thing about independent film that I am not particularly fond of. Since way back before I had any credits or any experience, I would go to film festivals and see a lot of the product and I would be like, that looks terrible. I mean, maybe the idea and the art behind it is in the right place and the heart's in the right place, but wow, the audio's terrible or the lighting's terrible or whatever they shot it on is an inferior camera. All that matters so much. And then their movie poster, looks terrible and the everything just screams don't take me seriously. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's unfortunate because I want to take people seriously. I want people to do well. Presentation is everything to me. I can't make a blanket statement and say it's the only thing that matters because it isn't.
Of course not. It's a combination.
Yeah, you kind of have to have everything. You have to. This is why this is a tough thing to do. It's not easy to make art because you have to put a lot of things together. And even I won't even say it goes as far as art. I'll say something as commercial art, because to make commercial something for public consumption, it has to hit so many notes. It has to look good. It has to sound good. It has to be good. It has to, be interesting. I guess good design and good promotion.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. That's
to get people in the door. If you want people to actually look at what you did, you're going to need that. Now, maybe what you did is amazing, and you better hope so, because if you can't get the people in there, it's not going to matter. If you do all this work and have all this heart and soul buried in a project, and then 100 people see it on YouTube or on some film festival, then I don't know, you could argue, is that worth it or is it not worth it? It's not something that I want to do. If I want to do work, I want to be seen. A lot of people, doing the work is the reward. And I agree with that too. That's perfectly valid. But if you want to go somewhere, if you want to be a professional, if you want to make more movies, if you want to make
a living,
you have to have an audience. And the only way to get an audience is to look like you know what you're doing and to get the people in the door to actually see it. And, I think even today, it's my favorite thing about what I do. There'll be hard days and we'll be sitting around and talking with other artists and we'll be saying, wow, this is really bad or this is really good. And I said, we'll just stop and go, how cool is it though, that at the end of this process, our work will be seen by millions of people. And that's that's where it's at. That's an amazing thing to create something. And maybe it's commercialized and it's watered down for the mass audience and whatever else you want to get into an artistic argument about it. But it's still, it's an art form and it's seen by millions of people, millions. And that's what makes cinema so great. And that's what makes working on movies so great. And, and I think, to even the most artistic, outsider, creatively, counterculture person, I still think they could benefit from really good promotion, self-promotion. You gotta package stuff. You have to. That's the way it gets out to the people.
Well, I think with the gluttony of product that there is out there, and whether you're selling yourself with the gluttony of people vying for the same jobs, or the gluttony of movies out there, there's no way to kind of sift through that without presentation is the equalizer at that point. It's the only thing that, not equalizer, it's the only thing that's going to make you stand out. So if you have a great movie poster, if you have a great trailer, if you have an amazing website, and you're able to build this kind of world around your project, same thing goes for yourself. If you have a great demo reel and a great website, and you present yourself in a professional manner and package yourself in a professional manner, that makes you stand out from all the other guys. That's the only thing that you really can do. You will never even get a chance anyone to see how good or bad your work is unless you know how to present it. And I think that is honestly one of my goals for Indie Film Hustle, is to show people how to present their work, how to get attention, how to package their work in a way that they can make a living doing so. And with all the options that there are out in the world now for self-distribution and Kickstarters and all that kind of stuff, that you can actually make a living. You're not going to get rich, but at least you can make a living and you can continue to make art and make a living doing it. So I believe, like you, it's so important to be able to package yourself or your project in the proper way.
No, it's true. And, it's not even that hard to do. out there, how do we learn? We learn by emulating. That's, since we're children, that's how you do it. So if you see an ad campaign, a poster, a movie, anything, a trailer, emulate it. I know it sounds like copying or a cheat or, but it really isn't, because this is how we learn. When I used to be an illustrator, and like any illustrator, when you start drawing, you emulate your heroes. You emulate the artists you like the most. Same for filmmakers, same for visual effects artists. You start emulating what you do the most, so what you like the most. So I would still say this is a good thing, not a bad thing. So when you're starting out, the fake it until you make it thing, emulate the best and emulate what you love. And really look. See, I don't think they look closely enough. Really look at the details.
Technique.
What makes it great? What makes a poster look professional? What makes a website looks professional? And I don't care if you have to copy a professional website down to the letter, do it, because that's how you're going to learn the actual form of what makes something good versus something that doesn't look as good.
And generally, when I do work, I always start with something I'm trying to emulate, let's say, and then by the time I'm done, it doesn't even look like what I started with. But at least I got a starting point, and then it kind of grows from there. And that happens with every art form, whether that's painting, photography. I mean, Tarantino has made an entire career out of that. He emulates every movie he's ever seen. He writes amazing dialogue, and he's an amazing talent. But he's the first to say, he goes, and if I can quote him, I steal from every movie ever made. And that's a direct quote from him. But everyone does that. As a filmmaker, we're all stealing from D.W. Griffith and from and Orson Welles, like everybody. Who did the first two shot? Well, someone stole that. Who moved the camera first? Someone stole that. Everyone's always stealing from everybody. And as Coppola said, if you're going to steal from the best.
It's true.
And it's true. And I think it was Picasso, I think, that said that as well. If you're going to steal from the best. So, anyway, so
no, his line wasn't his line about great artists, good artists borrow and great artists steal, or something to that nature.
Exactly. Thank you for correcting me, sir. I know it was off.
I might be wrong too, but it's what popped into my head.
So, are there any stories? We're going to wrap it up in a minute. So, is there any stories any fun stories working in the big leagues that you would like to share that won't get you in trouble, or deported?
Yeah. It's tough because, when we're working, I think, I would say that it's a general blanket statement. It's not specifically directed at one film that I've worked on or another. That's my legal speak there. But I've noticed something that happens in the big leagues, and you don't feel like it's going to come together until the very end. So a lot of the projects I've worked on have felt like the film wasn't going to be a film 6 weeks from the time it's hits theaters. So, we'll work these horribly long hours, and clients will have really crazy notes. So usually what happens is about a month from the movie being done, you're starting to finish things. And when they start seeing the finished product, invariably people have opinions. The client always has opinions. So they'll say, no, can we just try it like this, this, and this? And there's like, well, we've just been working 6 months to get it to this point, and I thought we were done. Yeah, but we've got a month. Let's try this, this, and this. All right, so we tried this, this, and this, and then they'll send it back. Can we do a little bit more of this, a little bit more of this? Another week goes by, and we'll do it again, and we'll do it again. And before you know it, we're right on the deadline, and they'll go, that shot, it looked good a month ago. Let's go with that. And so that's usually what happens in the big leagues, is this weird kind of circle of doing it good, the studio wanting to make tweaks, making a bunch of tweaks for the client because you've got to please the studios, and then ended up right back where you started from. I can't count how many times that's happened in the creative process, and always feeling like the movie's never going to get done. There's too many things, too many moving pieces. We haven't nailed down this. We haven't nailed down that. And then like 2 weeks before the film's supposed to come out, you're like, hey, it's looking pretty good. I mean, it just seems to be that, we have to have our backs against the wall sometimes to produce what we need to produce. I wish it didn't have to be like that. Maybe it doesn't, but that's kind of the way the business works now. And I always found that was kind of, an interesting way to work, to put it out there. I don't know. Interesting, would you call it?
Yeah. Basically, art is never finished. It's abandoned.
Yes. I mean, nobody wants to let a movie go to the cinema. Almost everybody wants to work on it another day, do another revision, try another thing. And sometimes we have to have deadlines, because deadlines are the only thing that make you stop.
Pretty much, as an artist. Absolutely.
Yeah. Otherwise you'll tweak something to death. So, if you're experiencing that out there, don't worry. It happens all the way up to the top of the chain.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. So I'm going to ask you the question I ask all my guests when they come on. Name your top 3 movies of all time.
Oh,
I know. And everyone
that's not fair.
I just pick 3 that you really enjoy and tell me why.
All right. Well,
no order. It doesn't have to be in order.
Yeah, there is no order. Man, it's really tough. I've got to say Star Wars, only because regardless of whether I think it's one of the best films of all time, it was one of the most influential films of all time for me. So I would have to say there's no way to not have Star Wars in the top 3. I'm going to have to go just off the top of my head, because there's too many movies that I love to death and have watched a million times. But I'm going to go with The Shawshank Redemption, because whenever it's on TV, I watch it endlessly. And each time it's like I'm watching it for the first time. And I think I've seen the thing hundreds of times, yeah. And I love it every single time. I don't know what it is about that film. If I could bottle it, I would. It's just such an amazing film. And for number 3, got to be Jaws, another film that I watch every single time I see it on TV.
So good.
And I'm captivated by it frame for frame. So if I absolutely am boxed into a corner off the top of my head today, those are the 3 I would choose.
3 very good choices. There's 1 Spielberg, 1 Lucas, and the Darabont. Shawshank. And I'm going to just throw in my 2 cents on Shawshank Redemption, because I have analyzed it in my own mind. And this is my ramblings of why I think it's so amazing, and how it touches a chord with everybody. I have yet to, though, anytime any of my movies or any of my projects get a bad review, I always just look up online, bad review for Shawshank. And there are out there.
You got to be kidding me.
Oh, no, just Google it, bad reviews for Shawshank. And then I read some idiot reviewing Shawshank Redemption in a negative light, and I go, I feel better now. It happens to everybody. And not saying that my films or my projects are anywhere near as good as Shawshank's, but it makes me feel better that I'm not the only one that has to deal with bad reviews sometimes.
So what you're saying is that there's hope for Fantastic Four yet? And yes,
absolutely not. There's no hope whatsoever for Fantastic Four, sir. So the reason why I feel that Shawshank Redemption has touched a nerve with so many people throughout the world, and has quietly risen above The Godfather as arguably the best movie ever on IMDb, at least, but considered in the pantheon of one of the best movies ever made, is that I feel that in many ways we all feel like Andy Dufresne. We all feel imprisoned, whether that be in our jobs, whether that be in our marriages, whether that be in our relationships, whether that be in any million of ways you feel imprisoned. And wrongly imprisoned at that. You don't feel like you deserve to be imprisoned. That's why Count of Monte Cristo, I think, has touched so many people, that story over the course of so many tens of thousands, hundreds of years. Well, I don't know when was that written. I forgot when it was written. But anyway, and I feel that when we see Andy go through that pipe full of crap, it's us. It's an analogy for us. If we just go through enough crap, especially as indie filmmakers, if we go through enough crap, we'll just break through the other side, clean ourselves off, get the money from the man who's been screwing us all this time, and move to Mexico and sand a boat and wait for your best friend to show up. You know, I feel that's one of the reasons why it touches everybody. I haven't met anyone who doesn't like Shawshank yet.
I mean, really, have you? I mean, yeah. Do they exist? Is there a person who doesn't at least like the Shawshank Redemption?
There are people out there. Because I saw the reviews. So there were, at least, look, there were people who gave Star Wars horrible reviews. I remember George Lucas walking around with a t-shirt that had that review on it. And it's just ironic and hilarious that he did that. But I've never met anybody who didn't like Shawshank. Nor do I really want to meet that person, honestly. It says something about. No, I'm joking. Yeah. But I think that's one of the reasons why, because it's on my top 3 as well. That without question is on my top 3.
I think it's my number 1. I quite honestly, I keep coming back to it over and over again. Whenever my head goes into the whole, how would you do? And usually it's a top 10 or a top 25.
And it's one of those, but it's not. It's one of those movies that it's not like you're not watching it because Spielberg or Hitchcock or Fincher did these cool camera moves or Scorsese like did this thing. It's just the purest storytelling that there is, honestly, in so many ways. It was just good writing, good character, good direction, good music. The score is remarkable. Everything just gelled. And
everything. Lightning in the bottle. I mean, sometimes I don't even think the filmmakers have absolute control. You know, no. Lucas himself has said, you know, sometimes movies just work and sometimes they don't. And sometimes all you can do is put the pieces together and hope, you know, that it works. And sometimes, you know, it's just the perfect storm. And I think Shawshank is one of those perfect storms.
Well, I mean, there's the famous screening of Star Wars that George did for all of his friends, Brian De Palma, Spielberg, and all those guys. And they all, you know, every one of them came out like, oh, poor George, man. You know,
except for Spielberg. I think Spielberg was the one who said it was going to be the biggest thing ever.
He, from what I've read, Spielberg was the only one that kind of got it. He's like, you might be onto something. I don't think he predicted that it was going to be this monumental hit, but he did say, I get it. I get what you're doing. I think you're going to do well with it. But the other, like Brian De Palma and John Milius and all these guys, like, oh, poor George, man. He spent all this time on this thing. It's going to be horrible. And then the same thing happened for Quentin Tarantino on Pulp Fiction. I just recently found out watching a documentary about him that he showed his he showed Pulp Fiction to a bunch of his friends. And he's famously good friends with Robert Rodriguez, who wasn't there. He was in Austin shooting something, so he couldn't make the screening. And then Robert called the friends, and everyone was like, "Quentin's gone, man. This is not. No one gets it. No one's ever seen anything like it. This is going to be a horrible thing." And one of the guys went as far. So I don't think anybody got it. I think there was. Oh no, the only person who Quentin said that got it was Catherine Bigelow. Catherine Bigelow saw it, and she's like, "I get it. This is going to be huge." And she like literally showed it to everyone. She like went over to James Cameron's house. Is like, you're going to watch this. You can't even imagine what you're in store for. Like, you've never seen anything like this. And like The Matrix and Star Wars, I think Pulp Fiction has also moved cinema. It moved cinema in a certain way, maybe not visual effects wise, but story wise. But even to a point where one of his friends was going to have a call. Quentin said, I had one of my friends who was going to give me a call and had a stern talking to about Pulp Fiction. Like, you need to do better work. And this is right before or right after he won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. He calls up, he goes, I was going to give you a stern talking to, but what do I know?
Yeah. Opinions, everybody's got them,
It's very true, man. Well, listen, let's wrap it up, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, talking to the Indie Film Hustle tribe and spreading out your pearls of wisdom. And as always, Dan, you're one of my best friends. So thank you so much for coming on board and yapping with me for almost an hour and a half.
My pleasure, sir.
All right. Talk to you soon, man.
Talk to you later.
Hope you guys got a bunch out of that episode. I loved having Dan on the episode. I've been wanting to have him on ever since I launched Indie Film Hustle. I thought a lot of the knowledge of visual effects, which is something we really want to focus on also on Indie Film Hustle, is a lot of the post-production and visual effects, because that's where I come from. And Dan is a great teacher. He is also a teacher as well. So I thought he'd be a great guest. So I hope you guys got a lot out of that. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. in the after the show notes. I'm going to put a bunch of cool links in the show notes as well. And if you want to learn how to get into film festivals for cheap or free, my 6 tips to get in are at filmfestivaltips.com. That's filmfestivaltips.com. And I'll show you how I got into over 500 international film festivals for cheap or free. So guys, thanks again for joining me on the episode. I really hope it was beneficial to you guys. And I will see you on the next one. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.